We are back to finish off our series on ushering in an era for WWE in 2003, this time talking about the Blue brand, the brand that I believe to have had the much stronger year in 03 in terms of in-ring competition and overall professional wrestling, I would say. Obviously, when you think of 2003, I feel like most people do think of SmackDown over Raw. Aside from the debut of Bill Goldberg on Monday Night Raw and the rise of Evolution, most of the time people are going to think about a few things. One of those being the release of SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, the video game on the PlayStation 2 that really changed the landscape of professional wrestling video games. Alongside the previous year release of SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, Here Comes the Pain is considered by many to be the GOAT, the greatest professional wrestling video game of all time, alongside a few honorable mentions in terms of, like we said, SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, WWF No Mercy on the N64, and WCW NWO Revenge. And alongside the cover star being the WWE Champion in Brock Lesnar, it featured the video game debut of who would become one of the most impactful superstars in the history of the WWE and one of the biggest names in professional wrestling in John Cena, the Doctor of Thugonomics. Now, back then, I don't think people really thought John Cena was going to be as big as he would become. But given the fact that this is the first video game on a major platform that featured the Doctor of Thugonomics, it's a very big deal. But let's get back to talking about the actual pro wrestling on SmackDown. Now, although Brock Lesnar debuted in 2002, we're going to talk about Lesnar later on in the video with his biggest feud of the year, which I'm pretty sure some of you already know what direction that's going in. But although Lesnar debuted on the Raw brand in 2002 and then went into SummerSlam to take on The Rock for the Undisputed Championship after winning the King of the Ring, SmackDown was basically known as the Brock Lesnar Show throughout 2003, the end of 2002, going into 2004 in WrestleMania 20, where Lesnar would obviously leave the company shortly after. But all of Brock Lesnar's big accomplishments, for the most part, took place on the Blue brand, and the first of those accomplishments would be winning the 03 Royal Rumble after defeating a former rival of his at the end of 2002 in Big Show to qualify for the match. Brock Lesnar would go on to win the Royal Rumble and head into WrestleMania 19 to take on, like we said, his biggest rival of the year, being the Olympic gold medalist in Kurt Angle. The 03 Rumble also featured the Royal Rumble debut of John Cena after transitioning from the 2002 Ohio Valley Wrestling prototype gimmick into a rapper gimmick alongside B Squared or Bull Buchanan, and that entire partnership would last into the early parts of 2003 until John Cena would turn on B Squared, becoming a full-fledged singles competitor as a heel. And alongside Cena, the 2003 Rumble would also be the last Royal Rumble that the charismatic enigma Jeff Hardy would compete in before he would move over to Total Nonstop Action Wrestling and then return to the WWE later in 2006/2007. Now we can talk about Jeff Hardy's brother in Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy's 2003 was a different direction than I think most people would have expected. Matt Hardy would transition into Matt Hardy version 1, but it wouldn't be the gimmick or the gimmick change, so to speak, alongside his Mattitude follower in Shannon Moore. It would be the fact that he would try to cut down his weight to get to the Cruiserweight Championship. Matt Hardy cutting down in weight, dieting, and working out to get to the weight limit, or I guess you could say weight cutoff, was a very entertaining portion of SmackDown in 2003. He would go into No Way Out in February and end up beating Billy Kidman to become the new WWE Cruiserweight Champion. Hardy would go into WrestleMania 19 and continue to defend his championship, beating the likes of Rey Mysterio along the way. The Cruiserweight Championship that debuted in 2002 was a huge part of SmackDown throughout 2007. However, I feel like Matt Hardy was one of the most entertaining champions to hold the belt alongside Jamie Noble, who would have the Cruiserweight Championship the year prior in 2002 alongside his girlfriend in Nydia. Another interesting prospect in the cruiserweight division was a man who made his name all around the world in Ultimo Dragon finally coming to the WWE. Most people expected him alongside another member of the New Japan WCW scene to make their way to WWE in Juventud Guerrera to really amp up the cruiserweight division. However, it seemed as if Ultimo Dragon's WWE career was very lackluster in terms of what people thought it could have been. And although he competed at WrestleMania 19 and had some good moments in ring, the career of Ultimo Dragon just really never got off the ground, and he was only with WWE for about 1 year until he was released. But in talking about the cruiserweight division, we now have to transition over to the secondary singles title on SmackDown, which debuted in 2003. That being the United States Championship. And the first ever newly crowned or inaugural United States Champion would be crowned at Vengeance 2003 in a match between Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. And the man who mastered lying, cheating, and stealing would go on to become the new United States Champion in Latino Heat Eddie Guerrero. Now in 2002 into 2003, Guerrero made his name as a part of the Los Guerreros in the SmackDown Tag Team division alongside his nephew in Chavo Guerrero. It would be Chavo and Eddie as part of the Los Guerreros. There was Edge and Rey Mysterio who formed a tag team, and then it would be Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle, which in 2002 would be proclaimed as the SmackDown 6 by the leader of SmackDown in Paul Heyman. However, in 2003, the SmackDown Tag Division was run by pretty much a trinity of teams. In the Los Guerreros and Eddie and Chavo, you had Team Angle in the likes of Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, alongside the Olympic gold medalist in Kurt Angle, and you had the newly debuting faction in terms of the full-blooded Italians with Chuck Palumbo, Johnny Stromboli, and Little Guido, aka Nunzio. And that was the bulk of the SmackDown Tag Division, alongside Billy Kidman and Paul London, which really started towards the end of 2003 into 2004, and a few other teams here and there, the Basham Brothers alongside Shaniqua, which kind of kicked off more in 2004 than 2003, but the full-blooded Italians, Team Angle and Benjamin and Haas, and Los Guerreros, aka Chavo and Eddie, were pretty much the mainstays in the SmackDown Tag Division for 2003. Now we can talk about the man from West Newbury, Massachusetts, John Felix Anthony Cena, formerly known as the Prototype John Cena when he debuted in 2002 on an episode of SmackDown emanating from Chicago, Illinois. But in 2003 and 2004, that's when John Cena really started to make his way up the mid-card and push himself into the main event heading into 2005. John Cena would go from a prototype to a rapper heel alongside his partner in Bull Buchanan, or B Squared, which is somebody I believe we mentioned earlier on in the video. However, after he was able to break away from B Squared, Cena would make his way to actually challenging for the WWE Championship heading into April's Backlash, taking on the undisputed champion in Brock Lesnar after winning a multi-man #1 contender tournament on SmackDown, defeating the likes of Chris Benoit, defeating the likes of Rey Mysterio, and even defeating The Undertaker. John Cena would go into Backlash and come out on a losing effort, but that was really his big feud, the first big feud of John Cena's career. He would have a parking lot brawl against Latino Heat and Eddie Guerrero for the United States Championship, and then he would head into Vengeance 2003 and end up taking on The Undertaker. The man who shook his hand after he made his debut on SmackDown in 2002 would become one of his biggest rivals in 2003. John Cena would take on The Undertaker at Vengeance and come out in a losing effort. However, he had a few victories against The Undertaker along the way, and this would push us into his United States Championship run, where he would defeat The Big Show at WrestleMania 20 in Madison Square Garden to win his first major singles title in the WWE. And one of the final segments of this video talking about SmackDown in 2003 is going to be the pivotal feud for not only SmackDown, not only 2003, but for the Ruthless Aggression era as a whole. That being the feud between the Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle and the undisputed WWE champion in the next big thing, Brock Lesnar. Now, we could go on and talk about every single match that these two competed in, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just know that they had a real-life competitive feud against each other. Not that they disliked each other in real life, but they were both so competitive that they just wanted to one-up each other, which in turn gave us some of the greatest matches of the Ruthless Aggression era. It all started when Brock Lesnar defeated Kurt Angle for the Undisputed Championship at WrestleMania 19. That was one of the most memorable matches of 2003, and it's a match where Brock Lesnar tried to end the match with a shooting star press across the ring, which is a move that he had, I guess you could say, perfected in Ohio Valley Wrestling, but hadn't really busted it out on the main roster, except for when he competed in some dark matches alongside Shelton Benjamin in the WWF. Lesnar would try to hit the shooting star press from across the ring and end up missing the move by just a mere inch and smacking his head right off the ring mat. Lesnar would go on to finish the match, despite knocking himself out momentarily, and hit an F5 on Angle to become the new WWE Undisputed Champion after winning the Rumble earlier in the year. However, the feud with Angle was far from over for the remainder of 2003. Lesnar would go on to defend his newly won championship at Vengeance and end up losing to Kurt Angle, allowing Angle to become the new Undisputed Champion. Following Vengeance and the Triple Threat alongside Big Show, we would move on to SummerSlam 2003, where Angle would be able to make Brock Lesnar tap out and remain the WWE Champion, looking as if Angle was the man who had the one-up on the rookie from Ohio Valley Wrestling. Following this, we would move into an Iron Man match, and not just any Iron Man match, but a 60-minute Iron Man match on SmackDown where Brock Lesnar would come out victorious after multiple pinfall or submission wins between the two of them and again become the new WWE Undisputed Champion. This was not only probably the best match in their entire feud, but it is one of the greatest matches in SmackDown history and probably the #1 match for the Ruthless Aggression era. We would then head into November Survivor Series 2003, where Angle and Lesnar would captain a team against each other. On Team Angle, you had the likes of John Cena, Chris Benoit, Hardcore Holly, and JBL. And on the heel side of things, on Brock Lesnar's team, you had the big men of the SmackDown roster in the Big Show, A-Train, Matt Morgan, and the man who many people believed was going to get a huge push following WrestleMania, but it never happened, in Nathan Jones. And I know you guys are going to kill me if I don't mention this, so we have to talk about the infamous ring break in the match between Big Show and Brock Lesnar on SmackDown, where Big Show got superplexed by Brock Lesnar off the top rope, and we saw the ring break for the first time in WWE history, at least for the first time in the modern era. Now, that obviously was back in June of this year, so it's a little bit off in terms of the order, but you can't have a video on SmackDown without mentioning that. And that pretty much sums it up for SmackDown in 2003. Obviously, we didn't cover every single tidbit on the SmackDown roster. We didn't cover every single memorable moment, but I feel like we got a lot out of the way, and we covered just about everything that was important for the Blue brand during this year. Now, we could go back to Survivor Series and talk about the fact that The Undertaker, or the American Badass, was written off of TV after the Buried Alive match with Vince McMahon due to the interference of his brother Kane. But that's more of a Raw brand thing, and it kind of doesn't even have anything to do with a specific brand. But yes, The Undertaker would lose the Buried Alive match to Vince McMahon, be buried by his brother Kane, come back at WrestleMania 20, and continue his undefeated WrestleMania streak by defeating his brother on the grandest stage of them all. But I feel like we covered just about everything else we could have when it comes to the Blue brand in 2003. So with that being said, I'm your host, Double M. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell with a 5-star frog splash while hitting the subscribe button with a little shimmy, shake, rattle, and roll. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out.